सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.
Namaskaram, ellarkum namaskaram. We are very, very happy to have a very eminent author, eminent, should I say, Swadeshi Indologist, eminent technocrat. Of course, he was a former technocrat amongst us. He has been kind of fighting a lone battle for our sake, for our heritage, for us to understand and appreciate what we have really inherited. And on this note, may I request Parama Pujya Swami Sukadevananda Ji, who is the Secretary of the Vivekananda College, Chennai, to come out to the stage. And I would like to request Sri Rajiv Malhotra Ji to come out to the stage. Rajiv Ji is a student of science, entrepreneur, has risen up the corporate ladder to the level of a senior vice president in IT&T. He had invested in several companies, and at the age of 45 or so, had an inner calling, and with the guidance of his guru, dedicated his life for what he has been working now for the past 25 years. He considers it his tapasya to be able to write new or do research, very detailed research on what is affecting, what is afflicting our Sanatana Dharma, and we are very glad to share that he has written a new book called The Battle of Sanskrit, which was formally released this morning by Sri Gopal Swami, who is the former Chief Election Commissioner of India and the Chancellor of Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan, Tirupati. We had it just this morning in Bharati Vidya Bhavan. I'd like to now request Param Pujya Swami Sukadevananda Ji to hand over a memento to Rajiv Malhotra Ji, welcoming him for this very unique and important occasion. Rajiv Ji has been an investor in the corporate world. Then he started investing in people who could develop the capabilities to answer the questions raised by Western Indologists. He had given several grants and donations to several institutions and professors, and the outcome of such an effort was the Invading the Sacred. He was the protagonist of that book. After that, he took over and along with Arvind Neelakantan wrote this book called Breaking India. It's a path-breaking book to understand the dynamics of what's happening in Tamil Nadu, right? Especially on the Dharma front. After that, he wrote a new book called Being Different, which essentially looks at our civilization, which we should look at with our own lens rather than the Western lens. After that, he wrote a very interesting book called Indra's Net, which kind of brings out how the Western Indologists and scholars have been looking at Hinduism as something cooked up by Vivekananda, and it's just over 200 years old, right? The new Hinduism. And now he is going to talk to us about the fact that in this book, Battle for Sanskrit, what is it that is there as the Sanskritic harmony between the Paramarthika and Vyavaharika in Sanskrit, and how it's very important for all of us to understand the nuances of it. May I now request Sri Rajiv Malhotra Ji to come and address us. Rajiv Ji.
Namaskar.
I will be in audience.
Okay.
Better I will come back.
Okay. Swamiji says he'll be in the audience, so I can also see Swamiji. Yeah, that's good. It's good. I'm indeed honored to be here. I'm always very honored to be invited in any place with Swami Vivekananda Association, because he was the true hero of modern Dharma all over the world. So all of us in our own humble ways are trying to continue what Swamiji started, and continues to inspire us. This is my 5th book. It's called The Battle for Sanskrit. Actually, it's Sanskriti, the battle for Sanskriti, Indian civilization, dharma, Vedic culture, Hinduism, all those you can think of. Because Sanskrit is the DNA, it's the architecture for all our Sanskriti. So the battle for Sanskrit is sort of the battle for all our culture, civilization. That's what I'm trying to talk about. The question comes, who is fighting whom in this battle? I'll talk about. And what is the battle about? What are they fighting about? So the byline has 3 questions that show 2 camps. Is Sanskrit political or sacred? Is Sanskrit political or sacred? Oppressive or liberating? Dead or alive? Now, there's a very powerful camp of Western Sanskrit studies with a lot of influence among Indian media people, university professors, government people, which takes the first position in each of these 3 pairs. So according to them, Sanskrit is political, oppressive, and dead. The second option in each of these 3 questions says Sanskrit is sacred, liberating, alive, which is the position I defend. So that's the battle. It has become fashionable for Marxist, leftist, atheist, Gnostic scholarship to take on Sanskrit as a body of texts, not just language, but Sanskrit as a body of texts, Vedas, Itihas, grammar, Smritis, and think of them as not sacred at all, which means that, of course, they know that people claim them to be sacred, but they don't consider Shruti to be genuine and valid. They reject the Shruti claim. And they claim that the Paramarthika and Vyavarika aspects in the Vedas cannot both be true. In fact, only Vyavarika has to be studied and considered useful. Paramarthika is the sacred side, the transcendental side, is to be sidelined because it's a sign of being primitive, backward, superstitious, irrational. Since you can't measure it empirically the way you can measure and test Vyavarika truths, you can't do that for Paramarthika. So Paramarthika is rejected by this group of people. Besides removing the Paramarthika from the context, because in our tradition we look sacredness as the context in which we read the text. When we read any Sanskrit text, we look at it through the lens of sacredness. So they remove that, and that is not the reason, that is not the method for looking at these texts according to them. They add 2 things which they see as the crux, the tattva of these texts. One is social oppression, that they have to look at, Shudras being oppressed, women being oppressed, somebody being excluded, Sanskrit is privileged, upper caste, this sort of thing. So they're looking at it like a human rights problem. They're looking at the data to look for human rights problems. So you can see the motive. And the second thing they want to add is political, that these texts have always had a political design, always. It's not something recent. Political, the Rajas sponsored these texts because they wanted to spread their power. So political domination of the ruling elite was the motive for these texts. So the debate is between insiders and outsiders. Insiders, and I count myself as one of them, I would count our monks in Ramakrishna Mission, various other lineages, Peethams, Mathas, as insiders. Insiders are those who consider the legitimacy of the Vedic Shruti, who see divinity as the basic purpose of these texts, to unravel and get us closer to that, the transcendent reality, who see this as adhyatmic truth, who see our tradition as something which is part of our Swadharma, our sadhana. So the basic insider view is one of acceptance of the tenets as the Vedas want to be seen. Now, the outsiders in olden days were called Charvaks. They dismissed the Vedas. They made fun of them. They said all this is mumbo jumbo. It's hocus pocus. Incorrect. It's meant to mesmerize and make a fool out of people, exploit them. So the outsiders do not believe what the insiders accept. Now, there's nothing wrong in having outsiders. Nothing wrong. We don't stop them. We don't burn books. We don't accuse people and tell them to stop. We have a long tradition of debate. So we debate them. And in the Vedic times, the Vedic people debated the Charvaks, who were atheists. The difference is today, the Charvaks have come back. The leftist, Marxist, atheists today are Charvaks 2.0. That's how in this book, I have a section called Return of the Charvaks. So Charvaks are back with a vengeance. They are more powerful than the previous Charvaks because they got money, material, power and wealth. They're funded by powerful organizations. They work in prestigious Ivy Leagues. Indian government giving them Padam Shiris and Padam Bhushans. Narayan Murthy giving them millions of dollars to take control of translating these books. So they have penetrated the Indian mind more than before. The last 500 years, Western science, technology and rise of the material world has been a big boon to the Charvaks. Because now Charvaks can say, to make airplanes, it was not necessary to know any Shruti. To make your smartphone, to make internet, car, all the things we enjoy, it's not because of anything to do with Brahman, idea of Vedant, not used. Maybe those are true or not true, but they are irrelevant to the main things progressing society. So Charvaks have valid, good, powerful arguments, the Charvaks 2.0, because they're riding on the wave of the success of this kind of civilization, the modern Western world of the last 500 years. So the Indian Charvaks have got something to latch onto and say, okay, now we are back. Previous Charvaks didn't have that. And the modern Charvaks can say we are connected with Harvard, Columbia, Oxford, and I fly there, I'm part of that, so the glamour is there. So it can impress the masses. The masses feel, okay, this is the real stuff, and that's the role model. The Charvaks have become fashionable. It's fashionable. It's cool, their lifestyle. So don't trivialize or dismiss the return of the Charvaks. They're very strong and more threatening than the past. Now, I'm not insulting or accusing or abusing these people. Actually, I'm lifting them up to a high stature because being called Charvaks is a sign of being a very good scholar. Charvaks in the past were good scholars. It was not that they did not know Sanskrit or they lacked rigor or that they were not intelligent. The problem we had is their basic metaphysical assumptions we don't agree with. Their basic metaphysical assumptions were that this world of senses, material world, is the ultimate world and there's nothing beyond it. So being an atheist was their basic starting point. And to call the whole Indian left and Marxists and secularists as Charvak 2.0, in a sense I'm glorifying, I'm giving them stature. I'm giving them stature. I'm saying that, okay, we know such people, we've had them before, and you are back. So we will deal with you again. The challenge it creates is for our insiders people who are embedded in Vedic culture must no longer ignore these Charvaks, have to respond to them. So I've written this book. This is my Purva Paksh of the Charvak 2.0. Like Shankara did Purva Paksh of the opponent. In those days, Purva Mimamsa, those kind of people, yeah, Sankhya people, Buddhists. Today, Purva Paksh of those is not so important because they are not the ones threatening us. It's Charvak 2.0. There are all over. In India, a lot of Indians fashionable to be Charvaks. So it is important for the insiders, the traditional scholars of Vedic lifestyle, Vedic culture, Vedic philosophy, to accept that we have now got a challenge from Charvak 2.0 and to give a response. I am writing this book not scolding the Charvaks, but scolding the insiders for not doing their job and not studying the Charvaks seriously and not giving them a response. I'm saying, I went to the Sanskrit college in Karnataka Sanskrit college in Bangalore a few days ago. And there are a couple hundred people. And so I said, how many of you have done Purva Paksha of the prominent Western Indologists today? At first nobody raised their hand. Then one guy, and then second. Out of 200-300 people, 2 claimed to have done Purva Paksha. Now that's unfortunate because our tradition says you must study the other. You can't dismiss them, you can't ignore them, you can't trivialize them, you can't bombastically say, oh, they're all bad, we don't need to worry about it. One guy said, I reject them because they're Rakshasas, so I don't need to study them. And I said, that's not accepted. It's not acceptable. You have to give an answer to his position. If he said, no, they have bad gunas. I said, if a person with good guna or bad guna hits a sixer, you can't say he's not allowed to sixer because he's got bad guna. Sixer is a sixer. According to the rules of cricket, it's a sixer. If a person wins chess tournament, you can't look at his character and say, okay, he's got bad character, he can't win. If Einstein is, somebody shows that Einstein had bad morality, you can't say his theory of relativity is wrong. So the person and what they are producing are 2 separate things. The person may be a bad kind of person, but he may have come up with some logic that we have to deal with. So you see, our people are too easy to dismiss and trivialize the opponent. And I feel that is a very serious problem. It is our laziness. You could say it is our tamas, that we don't want to face this. Either we don't want to face it for one bunch of reasons, or we join them. Lot of our insiders are on their payroll of the outsiders. This is another thing I found while looking for scholars to help me in this book. I asked a lot of people, and top Sanskrit chancellor, vice chancellors, deans of Sanskrit departments, chair of Sanskrit departments referred me to good scholars. And I engaged some of them. Some they wanted to do it as a principal, some we had to engage them with compensation to help me understand what is going on. But I must say not one of them produced anything useful, and they dropped out. Some of them dropped out in a few days or a few weeks, some of them dropped out in 3-4 months. One very honest person in Bangalore, well known, says, I've spent several weeks, you've given me this 500-600 page book of the Western Indologists to read and analyze and discuss with you. I've only been able to understand the first 20 pages because it's written in very heavy English. It refers to Western thinkers we don't know about. It refers to Western Siddhanta that we don't know about. So I'll have to go and get a library, I'll have to take a lot of time, maybe it'll take 2-3 years just to understand what is he talking about. So one of the problems faced by the traditional scholar is that many of them are not trained in English, and even if they know English, they do not know Western Siddhanta. They don't know who's Benjamin, who's Gramsci, who's Vico, and on, who's Heidegger. I mean, there are so many Western thinkers, intelligent, profound thinkers, with their own Siddhanta, with their own worldview. And we can't sort of say, okay, all that is wrong. We have to understand it and then give an answer. So Purva Paksh means we have to understand the other side. Uttar Paksh, we give a response. lot of our people try to give Uttar Paksh without doing the Purv Paksh, which means it's opinion. Yeah, I don't understand you, I don't need to understand you, but I got a lot of opinions. Not allowed. To debate, you must understand. You must understand, I wrote a 500-page book to give you my understanding of what they're saying. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, maybe you can argue, but this is my best understanding. I put it on the record, and based on this, I give a response. So this kind of rigor we haven't had. Our traditional people haven't had. Who has adhikar to talk and discuss our tradition? Right now, the adhikar it exists with the outsiders. It's the only civilization among the major civilizations whose adhikar is with the outsiders. China studies, Mandarin studies, is done by Chinese. Chinese universities lead the effort, not Harvard. Chinese control the journals that are most prestigious. Chinese control the conferences. All the Westerners who want to study China, they go to Chinese universities for a degree. That's the most prestigious degree. Similarly, Japan studies is controlled by Japan. Russian studies, you need to know the Russian language, and that's where the academic work is done. Arab studies, they study Arabic. Persian studies controlled by Iran. But Indian studies is controlled by Harvard, Columbia, Chicago, Oxford. So my goal is to bring the adhikar back, and I call that Swadeshi Indology. We have to counter the Videshi Indology, not by dismissing them or banning them or doing all kind of wrong things or acts of abuse or violence or something, but by creating our own counter argument, our own Swadeshi Indology. There is an echo. I think if you don't keep changing it, it will be better. Just make it, adjust it. Yeah, is it okay? Is it okay? So then don't change it at all. Just leave it, please. Thank you. So the question comes, who has adhikar? Because I'm often asked, who are you to represent the tradition? And the Westerners basically claiming that only they can give you the certificate. And I point out to them that neither Sri Ramakrishna nor Swami Vivekananda had a Western degree or PhD or some certification to qualify them. Nor did Sri Aurobindo, nor did Ramana Maharshi, nor did Adi Shankara, nor did Krishna. I mean, they didn't have, the adhikaris in our tradition are not based on some Western certification. Even within our tradition, there are multiple kinds of adhikars. Learnedness in texts is only one kind of adhikar, Shastra, expert. We also have people who get their adhikar through a profound experience of bhakti. May not even be learned, may not even be literate, but huge experience in bhakti gives them that exalted state and gives them that adhikar to talk about what that state is. We have yogis. To be a yogi, you don't need to know how to read and write. Like a sitar player, don't need to know how to read and write. Yeah? Like a chef does not need to know how to read and write. These are embodied knowledge, knowledge embodied in you. And you teach, you learn from somebody else, oral tradition. One guru with embodied knowledge teaches somebody with embodied knowledge. So, yogi with adhyatmic knowledge, tantric with embodied knowledge, bhakti with embodied knowledge, don't even have to be text learned necessarily. Guru as somebody with adhikar, transmitting to another person, and that person gets the adhikar, is not a system that the West understands. So our systems, multiple systems of adhikar and how it is transmitted is very interesting. The guru system is distinct. The yogi who achieves embodied state is distinct. The shastri who is text-based. The jnani who's done his transformation. Nididhyasanam, as Adi Shankara said. The bhakti person. There are many kinds of adhikars. So even amongst us, forget the West, even amongst us, we don't consider that there is just one type of adhikar. But the West has asserted its adhikar as a kind of monopoly over our tradition. So this is a problem, this is an issue I take exception with. And among the major problems I see in this book, the most important is the attempt to secularize by sidelining, marginalizing the sacred dimension, the transcendental reality, the Paramarthika. Now, for us, Paramarthika and Vyavarika are one integral unity. There is the Nirgun and Sagun. There is the transcendent and its manifestation. There is the divinity and its Leela. So, if we were to dismiss, ignore the transcendent realm, we become Charvaks, atheists, materialists. There is no guiding principle for dharma. There is just a very practical, whatever you can get away with. It's that sort of a world we end up in. And we know there's a problem with that kind of a world. Part of our problems in the world today are linked to excessive materialism, excessive consumerism, too much ego driving things. At the other extreme, if you have only Paramarthika and the person is escaping the Vyavarika, escapist, then the person doesn't have a social ethics. He's not concerned, he doesn't have compassion, you see. So, Swamiji created this Tattvamasi ethic, Swami Vivekananda, that the reason for compassion, Christians say love thy neighbor, but they don't say why. I love the neighbor, I love the other person because I see in him the same. Tattvamasi. The Tattvamasi ethic that Swami Vivekananda initiated, pioneered this modern interpretation. It's an old Vedantin idea, but he reinterpreted, brought it into the modern place, is a very good example of living in the world. The passage goes through the world, the dharma is in this world, the karma is in this world, the bhakti is in this world, leading to a transcendent ultimate. So, this balance is very important. If you dismiss this world and only say, okay, the Paramarthika, the point is we are in this world, we have been taken birth, our prarabdha brought us here, we have to work it out, we have to go through this world. We have to start where we are, standing right now. We can't assume that we push a button and we're out of here. So this escapism from the Vyavarika, the Laukika doesn't work because it leads to irresponsible action. You could do anything and say, oh, this is all mithya anyway. You could commit murder and say it's all mithya. Doesn't matter. You could be a malpracticing doctor, kill some patients, and you could say dead or alive, doesn't matter, it's all mithya. So that isn't allowed. You are whether it's mithya or not, whether it is ultimately real or relative only, the point is you are in a state where you have to carry out ethically your dharma. Your swadharma is defined in the context of the mundane reality. That is where you have to do it. That is what Sri Krishna teaches. You can't escape from some lofty argument. You are here to carry out your dharma and fight the adharma. This is all carried out in the mundane world. Knowing the ultimate reality is beyond all this, you have to carry this out. So the balance and interrelatedness of Paramarthika and Vyavarika is very profound, very deep in all our teachings. And therefore, the attempts to bifurcate and then dismiss the Paramarthika part is a very dangerous thing for us, and we should resist it. And this is one of the biggest arguments I'm giving in this book against the Western Indologists who are secularists, some of them outright communists. It's not Christian missionaries I'm criticizing in this book. I've done that in other books. It is extreme left-wing takeover of Sanskrit studies. Now, it's interesting that they praise Sanskrit and praise the text, as secular, and many of our people fall for it. Imagine if there's a murti and there's an archaeologist who's secular, who doesn't believe in anything divine, any Shakti, any presence of divinity. He says, I'll praise it as beautiful painting. It's a beautiful painting. Look at the colors, look at the features, look at the fineness. Or it's a beautiful sculpture. So the praise is there, but the praise as a piece of stone or a piece of painting with nothing sacred in it. A person of our background would not like that. He would say, that's not good enough. I am not interested in this appreciation as a kind of a dead piece. It's living, it has divinity. We've done Pran Pratishtha here. So the same way, to praise poetry of Sanskrit as secular, Vyavarika, Laukika, political poetry, to say this is, Ramayana is political poetry, is not something the Ramayana Bhakt will accept. You can say, I'm praising you, but you're praising in the wrong way. It's very important. And not very many of our people are able to nuance and differentiate that. That's what I wrote in this book, in clear terms. How much time do we have, Mohanji? It's 5:50, 5:25? Another? Okay, excellent. Then I have very good time. So, my project here is to bring to your attention that Vedas are being dismissed for their Shruti and looked upon as a source book to understand who was abusing whom. The revival of Sanskrit studies is being promoted as a way to figure out how to identify the toxicity, as they call it, the poisons, as they call it, in our texts, so that these can be removed. So we shouldn't be very proud that they're helping us. We should be concerned because our traditional people are losing ground when this kind of interpretation becomes fashionable. Now, no serious Christian would take it as a compliment if somebody said, Bible is beautiful poetry and beautiful military story of heroes and villains and who killed whom and how the emperor conquered. Of course, it has nothing to do with God. I mean, that's just made up. So, on the one hand, claiming to praise the Bible, but removing it of its holiness, removing the holy part of the Holy Bible, would not be acceptable by Christians. Similarly, the Quran, if somebody said there's no truth to the transcendent claims, it is just a story of warfare and what happened and all that. Myth. You see, the Abrahamic religions do not like to be called myth. They do not, this is very interesting. I have a friend who's teaching in one college in the US, and he's been influenced a lot by my thinking on these matters. And he wrote to me one day and said, he's in some technical department. He says they offered a course on world mythologies. And he says, because of what you've said, I took that course just to understand. And they're teaching mythologies of non-Abrahamic religions. So he wrote to the guy and said, why not Jesus mythology and, Muhammad mythology and Moses mythology? And he got a very angry reply. He's a faculty member. He got a very angry reply saying that we can't teach like that because nobody will accept it. It'll be students and their parents will mind it. So he wrote to me. I said, you should tell him that teaching Ramayana as myth is the same problem. I mean, why don't you put in the same stature? If you want scientific proof of Ram, then you should also ask scientific proof of all these other things. Yeah. If you accept it as the faith of a people, then you should accept our faith as a people. So you put it on equal terms and use the same criteria, the same measurement, the same lens, the same yardstick. And he kept fighting. He could never get them to include the Abrahamic religions as part of the mythology course. So in the end, they dropped that course completely, but they did not allow him to tamper with the Abrahamic religions. See, we have to fight. We have to have people who are so informed and so educated about our point of view that they're able to assert. If they are scared because they're ignorant, they try one or two times to, assert themselves and then they they make a fool of themselves because they don't have the arguments, then they run away and we lose. So we need informed people who've really done the tapasya. This is very hard intellectual tapasya to do this for many, many decades, to be that good. We need to train such people. Now, one of the things that came out of this Western Indology is that Sanskrit and Sanskriti spread across South Asia and Southeast Asia as a political device to assert power. In other words, wherever the king could popularize Ramayana, the king would become powerful because he's like Ram. Ram is divine, you can't challenge him, question him, he's a dictator, autocrat, absolute authority. He can oppress, he can ill-treat women, do whatever he wants, and it is allowed because he's the divine king. So the regular king would present himself in that way, popularize Ramayana, so it became a tool for political domination. This is a theory. And this is how a huge Sanskrit cosmopolis, as they call it, was created. A whole cosmopolis of Sanskrit was created. No military was required. It was a sophisticated intellectual job. No need for military like in the Roman Empire or any other empire to create a large territory under one cultural civilizational system. Here, the kings and the Brahmins had a conspiracy. The Brahmin would do a yagna in public that would make the king look like, now with this yagna he's become divine. He has this authority. The Brahmin, the king in turn would sponsor the Brahmin, keep him well fed, give him good funding. And the Brahmin would use this to write prashastis for the king, praise for the king. So they're going back and forth, reinforcing each other. And the result would be, of this collaboration would be, that they would produce some nice kavya, political kavya like Ramayana kind of things and other things like it. And this would be a way to showcase the glory, glamour, might of the king and make the people have awe, and therefore the king could get away with whatever and nobody would question him. So this theory says that the tradition has to be looked at through kavya. If you want to understand the history of Indian civilization, you have to look at it through kavya, and the kavya has to be not sacred but political kavya, and the political kavya has to be seen as a tool of oppression. So this is it shows Sanskrit as a technology for franchising political domination and oppression. That's really what it amounts to. And the strange thing is that until I did this work and uncovered these things and started talking to them, none of our people has bothered to study. We're giving awards. We're giving awards to these people, funding them. And so when I had a few meetings with the leader of this Western Indology group called Sheldon Pollock, who's a very intelligent man, a very hard-working man, a good scholar like the Charvaks, at Columbia University, occupant of a prominent chair, won Padam Shri, getting a lot of grants. When I had meetings with him, I asked, how come I'm the first person who's taken a very comprehensive view of your life work and written a critique from the insider point of view? People who've written about your point of view are your own students and followers, and they're more or less all the time praising you. But nobody from an opposing camp has written such a comprehensive view. Why? He was very honest. He said, nobody done it. I didn't stop them. It's not my fault. I said, a doctrine, a point of view becomes more interesting when there's a balancing opposing side, and then we have debate. Then it's more interesting. Your work is very important. It should make Hindus introspect, because you are the Puru Pakshin. Somebody should do this introspect based on your thinking. You are a mirror that can help us learn better. He was absolutely right in saying, I never stopped anybody. They never did it. It's their problem. It seems that you should go and talk to them and find out why they haven't done it. They are your opponent in the sense that you want to take them to task. He's absolutely right. I do not blame the Western Indologists at all. I do not think that we ought to stop them. They are projecting the civilization they come from. And this left-wing atheist Western view is being popularized in Indian academics, spreading like wildfire, fashionable among the Indian liberal thinking elite, Their idea of liberal is not moksha. It's not moksha. I don't know how you call it liberal. It is some kind of material liberal at a material level. It is important to liberate from poverty and have economic stuff. But so it's a certain imported idea, a certain set of imported doctrines that comprise this corpus, this library of intellectual ideas that are being promoted. A very troubling aspect of the Western Indology on Sanskrit and Sanskriti is something, a doctrine known as deep Orientalism. Deep Orientalism. Now, Orientalism is a term given to the Europeans who were studying Sanskrit. They were called Orientalists, starting with Sir William Jones in the 1790s. The picture on the cover shows Sir William Jones and the Pandits. Pandits are sitting on the floor taking dictation, Sir William Jones telling them. And the story, this is in huge carving on a wall inside a chapel in Oxford. Take a lot of permission, long time to me to get in a professional camera, go inside and take a picture, put it on the cover. It's my picture. It took a lot of effort. Now, Sir William Jones and the Pandits, big carving, is about Sir William Jones calling himself the lawgiver of the Hindus. He gave the Hindus their laws, as if we didn't have any. And what he had done is, he got a lot of Pandits to compile different things from Manusmriti and here and there. And he did some Sanskrit studies. In 2 years, he claimed to have become an expert on Sanskrit studies. So he mastered all the texts according to himself. Actually, he was hiring Pandits to do the work and copy-paste here and there. It's not necessarily that. He certainly didn't do the tapasya. He certainly didn't do the whole system of learning that we go through. But he was the judge of the Supreme Court in Calcutta that the British East India Company set up. Imagine they set up a court called the Supreme Court of India, but run by the British East India Company. And he was the judge. So he, as the first prominent Sanskrit scholar from Europe, said he has discovered Sanskrit. He became the person often considered to be the one who discovered Sanskrit, as if we never discovered it before, you see. So he started what became known as Orientalism. And they did a lot of good work also. There is no doubt. They did a lot of good work also. They revived our interest. But they took all the important manuscripts to Europe. They have never been returned. By one estimate, there are 5 lakh Sanskrit manuscripts in foreign archives, libraries, museums. The government of India should ask them back, but nobody has bothered. So these are some of the oldest manuscripts of various texts. Some of the oldest manuscripts available are not in India, but somewhere else. So they did this to study. They got many ideas out of it. They got some scientific ideas, linguistic ideas, a lot of philosophical ideas, which they repackaged as Western thought. A lot of Western enlightenment, Western thought is actually inspired by other cultures which they plundered, from which they took ideas. And as a part of this came the Aryan invasion theory. It's a byproduct of Orientalism. Max Muller produced that less than 200 years ago. And then Robert Caldwell, there's a statue of him in Chennai somewhere. He founded this Dravidian theory. And we worship these guys as great thinkers. They started these theories which in India did not exist. I mean, the Tamil literature is so rich. If there was this history of we the Tamil people and we have been opposed by the Aryan people, if this was true, then how come for thousands of years so many thousands of pages of Tamil text never mentioned this kind of theory? There is no Aryan-Dravidian divide, no sense of we are the Dravidian people. That does not exist in the Tamil texts. It suddenly pops up when Bishop Caldwell thinks it's a good idea, and we accepted it. So either we have to think that we are dumb, our ancestors were dumb, and all this talk about great literary heritage is devoid of enough self-reflection, and we never discovered that we are Dravidians. We never really discovered that. Either we have to accept that, or we have to say that this whole theory is wrong. So it's become political. It's become politically incorrect to talk about all this, to raise issues. But once upon a time when Caldwell and Max Muller created these different theories, you know, the point is that within Europe these were discussed, but in India nobody argued, no response was given. The Aryan theory was accepted very useful to the Europeans because the Germans could feel they have a heritage, the old great heritage of Aryans. British could feel that their rule in India is justified because if they are the Aryans, then they should civilize the natives, Aryans being superior. So this is an example of how Indology without response from our side becomes toxic, becomes a poison, becomes a dangerous thing. Today's entire this Dalit movement started as a caste system movement, and caste system is a distortion of jati and varna. We don't have the word caste, is not a Sanskrit word even. So you have to look at the history of Lord Risley in the late 1800s to see how he formulated and crystallized this idea of a linear hierarchical caste system, when before that it was very fluid kind of a thing. There were jatis, some were poor, some were rich, there were problems, but it was not fixed like caste kind of a thing. So one of the audacious theories being promulgated is that Orientalism, all its bad things that they did helping the colonizers, Orientalists were like the intellectual army supporting the colonizer, working for them, funded by them. They were doing the R&D for the colonizer. And so that is being exposed as racist. And now the counter argument that has come up says that these Orientalists did not come up with racism on their own. They discovered this racism by studying Sanskrit. That Sanskrit contained ideas of abusing other people, excluding other people, ethnic superiority, inferiority, this hierarchy, violence over other people, was discovered by the colonizers when they studied Sanskrit. They got this idea and they also started adopting it. So their rule in India was not something the British thought of doing this kind of colonial oppression. They just continued the Brahmin and Kshatriya oppression. Oppression was always going on and they just continued, they stepped into the shoes of the Indians, used the Indian Hindu law and continued the oppression. So this is a way to absolve Europeans, let them off the hook of the things they've done. And then the theory goes that the Nazis in Germany studied Sanskrit and got a lot of these ideas of oppression, which led to the Holocaust. So this whole Nazism, hating the others, having violence against the others, rather than finding the origin of this in Germany's own history, rather than looking for racism in the past of the Europeans, which is full of that, rather than looking at it in the Bible, the hatred for some other people. This tribe has to kill that tribe and this and that. Rather than looking at these things in their own civilizational past, this group of Indologists like to claim that these ideas originated in Sanskrit. So hence Sanskrit is deep Orientalism, and this other Orientalism of Europe is a superficial one. I don't let them off the hook. I tell them that the earlier Orientalism was European. Today's Orientalism is American. This is Orientalism 2.0. It's a more sophisticated Orientalism. And I give a different history of how this Orientalism is based on, genocide of Native Americans, slavery of blacks, all that kind of stuff, to remind them that they can't blame all this on Sanskrit. This is their own problem. This problem is their own problem and they have to deal with it. So, in this manner, I give you in each chapter, a major area where I feel Sanskrit studies has to be revived correctly from the insider point of view with the sacredness preserved, not looking at it primarily as a political, social doctrine. Now we have political issues, we have social issues. We must study them, we must find solutions for them. But we don't have to denigrate and throw out all our sacred texts as a result. We don't have to do it in a leftist, atheistic style. But at the same time, we have to acknowledge we got problems and we have to take ownership and resolve and deal with those problems. We have to do that. Okay. So I'm not absolving us from the responsibility to tackle, social political problems, which we definitely have. Now, what I want to do as a result of this analysis is I want to create what I call a home team. And to me, a home team is a group of people, or multiple groups of people based in India, committed to taking back the adhikar, taking back Sanskrit studies, Indology and so on. So we have the world-class journals, academic journals here, academic conference once a year, best university type of for Indology and Sanskrit studies right here. And these should be connected with the spiritual organizations like Ramakrishna Mission, various mathas, and also fluent in English, fluent in studying and doing Purvapaksha and others. So I am looking for alliances with traditional groups of scholars to create this sort of a network of home team, a home team of scholars, Swadeshi Indology you might call it. So I want to conclude by just telling you that this book was always kind of in the pipeline, but I became more enthusiastic and interested because about 18 months ago I was told that Sringeri Peetham was going to give to an Ivy League university and under the control of one of these Charvak people, the authority to represent Adi Shankara's legacy, Adi Shankara's philosophy, officially in the name of Sringeri Peetham. So it's like outsourcing your heritage. It's an amazing thing. I mean, this is so amazing that they were about to do that. So I intervened. I didn't say stop and all. I just said, let me do a Purvapaksh and present it to you. Then you can decide. They had not done a Purvapaksh. You're about to spend $4 million budget to set this up. Why can't you spend a tiny fraction to get a report from some neutral people on who are these guys, who are these Charvaks, is it fair or unfair, what do they think of Adi Shankara? All that has to be figured out. And I ran into a lot of anger. Rather than thanking me for helping them, rather than, they kind of thought I'm spoiling, I'm kind of interfering. I don't have any intentions to interfere. I just want to do my job as a scholar and bring this to the knowledge of the public and let people decide for themselves what they want to do. So if Ramakrishna Mission were deciding that they'll create a Swami Vivekananda chair in some Ivy League, I would suggest it is very important before you do that, let's do a Purvapaksh on those scholars. What have that university produced? Who are these scholars? What is their ideology? What wavelength are they on? And even if they are fine, I would put in the contract some requirements that they must subscribe to certain things, certain lifestyle. And I would also make sure that people ordained as monks in the Ramakrishna Mission are the ones who are sent, because they should be the ones representing. And it should not be that we give the money, put some name and let others do it. I will tell you that Judaism studies is mostly done by rabbis, mostly. Many imams are involved in Islam studies. Many ordained Buddhists by Dalai Lama are teaching Buddhism. So it is not like ordained monks are not allowed to teach in the academy. They should be, if they get proper degrees and credentials. So I would rather spread the ideas globally using our own resources as opposed to handing somebody else millions of dollars and hoping that they'll treat us well, because that's not a smart idea. So adding further pain, in the last few days I heard that the the new government is thinking of $50 million to be given to Western Indology. So I'll have more fights. And that's because now the Western Indologists are trying to infiltrate the government by getting Hindus who are close to the government organizations to represent their case. And some of these Hindus are well established with the Hindu political organizations, well established, but compromised in the sense that they think the other side is good, they're not bad, they want to, want to get Indians to fund Westerners to do Indology. Very strange, very strange. So with that, I will close. Thank you very much, and I would love to take your questions.
Thank you, Rajiv ji. It was a very nice exposition of the nuances of Paramarthika and Vyavaharika, as well as the Sanskritic harmony in between them, unlike how others would like to drive a wedge between the two to be able to sideline, eject out the Paramarthika. We now are open for question answers. I'd like to request you all to keep your questions brief, to the point and direct. The what, where, how, why, if, when, etc. I'd like to request the people who would like to ask questions to come out to the stage, ask the questions here, and Rajiv ji will respond. And we'd like to do that for the next maybe 30 minutes max. We'll wind off by 6:25 sharp. So please come.
Namaste, sir. I have two areas, two questions. I'll put it very briefly. One is that yoga is now globally accepted, and yoga also has the origins in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, Vyasa's Bhashya, and so it has also a Sanskrit origin. So how do the Western Purva Pakshis look at yoga? Number one. And how do the insiders' approach should be in taking the fight to the other party? Second is about the revival of Samskrita as a spoken tongue in India by organizations like Samskrita Bharati. So how does the Westerners look at this, and then how do we go about this? These two.
Both are excellent questions. Yoga has become a battleground. More and more Westerners, first they studied in the 60s and 70s, they studied under Hindu gurus. But the Hindu gurus did not convert them and did not teach the Hindu links. In order to make it easy to understand, popularize, they decoupled it from Hinduism and taught it like exercise and like, so they ignored the teachings which are linked with the higher states of consciousness, with even in Patanjali, the higher states of consciousness, the samadhi and so on. And it was mainly hatha yoga, that type of thing, and some breathing, pranayama and so on. So what has happened is, the yoga movement in the United States has taken what I call a U-turn, which means starting with the Hindu context, they decontextualized, removed the Hindu context and turned it into secular yoga. And this secular yoga is now being recontextualized in Christianity. There is a thriving movement called Christian yoga. Huge movement called Christian yoga. Several hundred centers of Christian yoga exist. And they are saying that this is Christ Chakra. And Surya Namaskar is translated as sun salutation, not S-U-N, but S-O-N, Son of God. Jesus as Son of God. So it's salutation. Surya Namaskar is sun salutation, where S-O-N salutation is salutation to the Son of God, to Jesus. So they've come up with their own symbolism and they've come up with their own history. According to them, yoga was plagiarized by B.K.S. Iyengar and his guru from the YMCA. Because YMCA was teaching exercise, and people like Swami Vivekanand and all these other B.K.S. Iyengar and his guru felt that Indians were weak physically and we needed to exercise, but they wanted to show that this is part of our own heritage, so they came up with yoga. And this yoga was kind of using Sanskrit vocabulary to capture and digest Western exercise and call it yoga. Of course, this is rubbish because you see Hatha yoga postures in early texts, hundreds of years earlier. You even see yogis in the Harappan civilization in, thousands of years ago. But this rewriting the history of yoga as something kind of a Western influence and decoupling it from Hinduism is a very big topic. Dissertations are being written, books are being written, conferences are being held, and people who say that this is a Hindu system are being called chauvinists, saffron, cultural, supremacy, all kind of abuses being given to those who are now trying to claim yoga back, because it may be too late. We have lost it. So now we have to fight it in a very aggressive way, okay, which we will, and we have to. So this is going on, and I'm very glad you raised this issue. The second is oral tradition. The book I've written, this Battle for Sanskrit, the main Purva Pakshin that I'm criticizing in this book is very much against the oral tradition. He says that history really begins with writing. So whatever happened before cannot be considered history. So by doing that, he's wiped out so much of our history because it's oral. He says, I have no proof. Written is all I can see. And therefore, since I can't tell you who oral, because we weren't there, we can't prove any oral stuff, so we dismiss it. And so, and he also says that this oral tradition before writing was secretive and allowed Brahmins to keep their hegemony, their superiority over other people. They could oppress other people. It was very uncreative. There was no innovation possible. Now, this is all wrong because there's an oral tradition. They had produced so much astronomy, kept improving that astronomy, so much mathematics, medicine, so much, so many grammars. So the orality, oral, does not mean lack of creativity. It's not some fixed tape recorder going on playing like they want it to sound. And then the revival of the oral tradition, they consider to be dangerous because they feel it's being done by these saffron political parties. So the old oral tradition is being dismissed as not being important to study, and the new revival is being dismissed as sort of a political movement. So that's the state of affairs. My job is I can't say they are wrong or whatever. I can say this is their position, and the insider position is different. That's all I'm saying. This is what the outsiders are saying. This is what the insider's position would be, and let there be discussion and debate in a friendly way. Thank you.
Good evening, Rajiv ji. I'm honored to get your thoughts. I'm very honored if I can get some of your thoughts. I have not read all your books, but I'm very familiar. When we are doing a Purva Paksh or Uttar Paksh, we face a certain unique problem. Because our thing is not based on intellect, it's more based on perception and so on, and I have not perceived anything. So how do I talk about these things? When I lived in the West, in England, I used to attend various societies and so on, and they will talk all sorts of things. They will talk of machines taking over people and singularity and all sorts of things. But I was facing representing Indian thought. I was facing trouble. Nobody was prepared to listen. So I thought, what is it? And then I later realized that here we are always talking of things that is way beyond us. So how can I talk about concepts which I have not perceived?
I understand your
But
question.
I have a small comment regarding this that I had my own, which is this, that in the scientific world, they have a notion called integrity, scientific integrity, which that way I feel we also I could define a notion called spiritual integrity, which to me is, don't talk about things you have not perceived as though you have perceived it, and when you're talking about things that are beyond you, just quote that they say so. They say the true nature of man is supposed to be pure consciousness. Don't say that it is, because I don't know it is.
I think what you are saying is that our tradition relies a lot on experiential And if you haven't experienced, how can you defend the tradition? That's really your question. If you don't, that's what I'm saying. If you haven't had the experience, how do you defend the tradition? That's what I think you're saying. So, part of the claims are experiential, but there's also logic like history. Like we can have astronomical dating of a text. If a certain text refers to the sky with a certain configuration, we know through software when that happened. So it's not about experiencing anything. We can say that this Ramayana, this particular verse in the Ramayana occurred at such and such year. That has nothing to do with inner experience. So there are certain objective facts like that where we can refute the other Purvapakshin based on logic. Also, we can, when they stir up that this Sanskrit died 1,000 years ago, we can respond by showing that after that supposed death, a lot of new products, new literature came. That doesn't require me to have adhyatmic experience to show that new texts came after supposedly it died. Another claim they make is that Ramayana was not popular among people until the Turkish invasion, and then the Hindu kings needed a story to unify them against the enemy. So the Hindu kings boosted the public stature of Ramayana in order to have a narrative that would go against the Muslims. Now this is an interpretation they have. But I can show, and I've shown in this book, that long before the Turkish, there were Ram temples, there was Ram Leela. So the prevalence of Ramayana is not as a reaction to the Turkish invasion. Now this response, this Uttar Paksh I'm giving is not based on adhyatmic state. It is, so it depends on what claim you are refuting. If it is a claim about a higher state of consciousness, then to refute it, we need that higher state of consciousness. But a lot of the claims, those guys don't have any higher state of consciousness. They are making claims about history, about political motives, about social oppression. They're not making claims about consciousness. So they're making sociological claims, social sciences claims, political science claims, and therefore we can counter it at the same level. So a large part of the Purva Paksh, Uttar Paksh is not about consciousness studies. So the issue of, there's modern consciousness studies, that's a whole different domain. In that domain, a lot of correlation of yogis and meditators, a lot of correlation is being measured with brain states, neurological states, being done right now. So the proof and negation of claims is happening in a very scientific way with empirical measurements. And our tradition is coming out very good. In fact, a lot of the new ideas in neuroscience are coming out of the study of meditators. But that's a whole separate book than what I have written here.
My name is Janaki Raman. Namaste, Swamijis. I want to ask only one question. In our Indian history, most of the students, they are studying the age of Adi Shankara, that is only in AD, about the 7th century or something. But according to the maths, it is BC. Similarly, in the Guru Parambara Prabhava, the age of the Alvars, Nammalvar, Bodhattalvar, Paihalvar, and so many Alvars, it is more than 3,000 or 4,000 years. But in our Indian history, we are studying, it is in the 7th or 8th century. Similarly, the age of the Tirumular, most ancient Tamil scholar, is more than 3,000 years or 4,000 years according to the Puranas. But in our Indian history, we are studying, it's only in the 3rd or 4th century. Which we have to believe that please kindly.
Thank you.
Similarly,
I understand. No, I understand. You can keep giving more examples, but I get the point. I get the point. I will answer it.
Okay.
Please. Okay. Dating the Indian texts of all kinds is a thriving and vibrant field called chronology. The chronology of Sanskrit, Tamil, various texts. There's a field like that. The chronologies that people accept in the world are established by colonial Orientalists. And we accepted those. Now there is a trend to challenge. So different people are challenging different dates. So So there is one Ashoka Klujkar who's challenging the date of the Buddha. There are people in India who are challenging the date of Adi Shankara. There are people who are challenging the date of the Ramayana, Valmiki Ramayana, making it much older. Now, there is a project in Delhi University Sanskrit department. If you are interested, contact them. Ramesh Bhardwaj, great scholar, chair of that department. He is leading in his department a project on the chronology of ancient Indian texts and events. So if I would, rather than giving you it would be second-hand information, because I would only tell you what I know from them. They are doing the latest project funded by the Indian Council of Historical Research. It started, I think, a year or two ago under the new government. They are doing this project to come up with the best available date for major Indian texts. So I think that's the best place to go. Thank you.
Gopal, my question is that whenever we are talking about Sanskrit, basically we talk about literature, philosophy, spirituality, etc. But there is more to do in Sanskrit as far as the STEM disciplines are concerned. That is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So is it not important for us to do the knowledge mining and bring out the old wisdom to establish its relevance to the modern system of knowledge?
Yes,
And is it not important for us to do the interdisciplinary research?
Yes.
That is Sanskrit and music, Sanskrit and mathematics,
Absolutely.
etc.
Absolutely.
And especially the NASA scientist who has now brought out that particular article has created some sort of interest amongst Indians, and especially the 102nd Indian Science Congress, which was held in Mumbai University, even though there was some controversy related to the surgery and aerospace and other things. But otherwise, they say that the 6th generation computer will be out in 2025 and the 7th generation computer will be out in 2034, when they are going to, the entire system will be manipulated by artificial intelligence. Therefore, is it not important for us to study the STEM disciplines in Sanskrit and do interdisciplinary research for the benefit of the future generation?
I understand. I understand the question. It's a wonderful question. This is very close to my heart. I think, in fact, the revival of Sanskrit and Sanskrit texts should not be just a separate department. They should also introduce this in the mathematics department courses on the history of mathematics as done in Sanskrit. They should introduce in medicine, medical institutes, they should teach Sanskrit texts and so on. So Sanskrit texts as a way of thinking, as a deeper state of consciousness where you can get insights into science than just the logical level. These ought to be introduced in the various disciplines. In fact, if somebody asks me what's the contemporary application for the revival of Sanskrit, I would say it is not ordering a cup of chai or taxi or turning on a light or something. Those are nice to learn as a simple thing to popularize. But the real asset, intellectual property asset we have, is that Sanskrit and its meditative uses in mantra as a way of thinking, as a creativity, can lead us to new discoveries. So we have to first understand the existing, what the texts are saying about science, technology, mathematics, all of that. We have to understand that, rediscover that, let mathematicians discover Sanskrit, let physicists discover Sanskrit, and so on. Medical people should. And then let R&D take it forward. It should not just be going back. It should be using it as a way of thinking and taking us forward. Now this is something we have to do, but this is not happening enough. I see science and Sanskrit talking about nostalgia about the past. Now I would like people to take it forward. And this requires serious funding, serious brains to enter the field. But I agree with you.
My name is Ravindran, and I've read your books. I've been in touch with you in some ways. You made some points in passing. My focus area is only science, and your focus area is science. Basically, how Ramanujan saw every equation has a relationship with the divine.
With goddess.
Ramakal. Otherwise, nothing else. And he was the only scientist or mathematician that I know who related, as you pointed out, as Krishna says, Vyavarika to Paramarthika, at least in modern terms. And that is the kind of science that we need to pursue.
Amazingly correct.
And that's has to be the inspiration. Should we be pursuing this in a very, very big way?
Yes.
And I know of one person who has been doing it. I have been in touch with you on that matter. And that's the kind of thing that we should be doing,
And you know, I really, really like to hear somebody say that, because this is ultimately all I want to do. This is everything is just a way to clear the way. Everything is to clear the way so this can happen.
I'll just make one comment on this. So the situation is perfect, because you might be knowing in quantum physics, they come to a complete dead end.
Yeah.
That they cannot predict the next state, the entirety of the state. The material science is completely at a dead end. Ultimately, it's only technology that is working. That's why everything is getting converted into big data. So here is an opportune moment to fund this activity, to come off from this.
Yeah, I think that we could be creating the next huge breakthrough in fundamental science. Fundamental science. Like relativity was a breakthrough, like quantum physics was a breakthrough. And I agree with him, the next huge breakthroughs could be from our tradition. Should be. But the problem is, Westerners with limited appropriation here, there, are busy appropriating, repackaging it, recharacterizing it in their own framework, and getting big recognition. And our people are sort of not involved.
But they are not coming to the divine answer.
They're not coming to the divine answer.
Therefore, they will never be able to come to the science which is an eternal truth in that perspective.
They are smarter than that. As the science requires them to do that, they will reinvent Christianity to make it seem like that.
Leave aside Christianity. Because Christianity is nowhere.
No, I'm telling you,
yeah.
because the amount of repackaging, reinventing Christianity to fit meditation, to fit higher states of consciousness that is currently going on is amazing. Because project started, Mind Life Institute, which is a collaboration between the top scientists in the West and Dalai Lama. So they start studying how to fit Madhyamika Buddhism and consciousness and all that, and they're having these meetings every year. They've had 20, 30 meetings, and the Buddhists are not getting the value, they're giving the value, and they're being given a lot of respect and honor. They're too poor to be able to receive, to match the Westerners. The Westerners sucking that knowledge, both in theory and empirical measurements on meditators. All this is fed neuroscience, and these neuroscientists are now about to get some Nobel Prizes for major breakthroughs in the way the mind works. So the theories of consciousness and mind moving way ahead of what material science, material atheistic science could achieve. And then there is a huge project by Templeton Foundation called Science and Religion, which really means Christianity, and they are giving lip service to other religions. I was involved with those guys until I realized what they're doing, and then I dissociated. They are basically taking this cutting edge Hindu-Buddhist contribution to neuroscience and cognitive science, and then finding ways of fitting it into Christianity.
Same problems are even in science. Indians don't study the Western philosophy of science. So therefore we don't do the Purva Paksha of this philosophy of science from our perspective. That's the real problem.
You see, he's used a very interesting term, philosophy of science. When we say we had scientific knowledge, actually it was philosophy of science.
Yes.
Actually it was philosophy of science. There is a difference between philosophy of science and science. Usually there is a philosophical new idea, and then the scientist has to turn it into mathematics, quantify it. Like for instance, Vivekananda and Tesla. Vivekananda was teaching Tesla that matter and energy are equivalent. Matter and energy are equivalent. But he didn't have, we did not have E equals mc squared to quantify that. Okay. So from this philosophy of science, later the Westerners developed actual science. So we have to realize that philosophy of science does not get you awards and Nobel Prizes and patents. When you turn it into science, then you do. And then when you turn that science into technology, you get patents and you make billionaires. So we must also learn to take our philosophy of science beyond just philosophy of science into actual science and into actual technology, and not just be happy teaching it to some Westerner who comes and gives us some token recognition, and we're very proud that he's given us some importance. This is our inferiority complex. Thank you so much.
Pranam, sir. Is there any difference between Adi Shankaracharya's Advaitam and Swami Vivekananda's Advaitam?
You have to speak. I couldn't understand. Difference between?
Is there any difference between Swami Vivekananda's Advaita's philosophy and Adi Shankara philosophy? Is Swami Vivekananda's upgraded version of Adi Shankara?
I didn't understand. So you have to speak slowly and tell me.
Yeah. He just wants to know, are there differences between Adi Shankara's Advaita philosophy and Swami Vivekananda's Advaita philosophy?
Okay.
That's question one.
Let me answer that. I want you to read my book, Indra's Net. I'm answering your question. Yeah. I wrote a whole book called Indra's Net just to answer that question. It's a 400-page book, 400-some page book. I think we have copies available outside. Basically, the allegation made was that Swami Vivekananda did not understand Vedanta and got ideas from Christianity, got ideas and came up with Raj Yoga, got ideas of work ethic and turned it into Karma Yoga, and got ideas of devotion and turned it into Bhakti Yoga. These allegations are made that he manufactured a religion and called it Hinduism just to give us national pride. Okay, and that this is in contradiction to Adi Shankara's ideas. I have given a long argument that he is basically reinterpreted. It is not like he invented something from scratch. He reinterpreted these traditions. And the dichotomy, the subtle differences between Swami Vivekananda and Adi Shankara were already there in the Sringeri Mutt itself. Even after Adi Shankara, his own followers came up with new interpretations. So it is not Vivekananda who kind of made a new thing. This evolution of Vedanta and even evolution of Advaita Vedanta has been going on with the Sringeri Mutt. It has to do with whether Nididhyasanam, which is the Shankara method of moksha, what is it, the relationship between Nididhyasanam and yoga. That is really the crux. It's a very complex philosophical issue. Please look at it in Indra's Net and you'll see a detailed explanation.
Osho-like person, Osho says Vivekananda is a politician. He's not a realized soul.
I didn't hear it. What Osho says?
Osho says Vivekananda is a politician.
He's not a realized soul.
Okay.
As a Hindu, how is he Vivekananda?
Okay. Osho is entitled to his position. He's entitled to it. I see Swami Vivekananda as one of the most profound enlightened beings in modern times, because one could not have done so much at such a young age. One could not have just dreamt up so much. You know, I don't buy Osho's idea on Swami Vivekananda. I like Osho for many other things. I like his meditations. I actually learned a lot from his meditations, and I like some of his discourses, but I don't necessarily agree with him on everything. So I don't agree with him on Swami Vivekananda at all. To me, Swami Vivekananda is one of the greatest giants we've had in our Hindu culture.
Namaste, sir. My name is Venkat Raman.
Close to the mic.
Yeah, in your lecture, you had mentioned that countries like Russia and China, Japan specialize on their language for their education to bring them up. And you had mentioned the main point was to bring up Sanskrit like that in our Indian culture, which was there once, but now it has dropped because of Oxford, Cambridge coming in more into the education. How can we push Sanskrit? I didn't get the point. How can we push Sanskrit in this modern world?
Okay, so join Sanskrit Bharati, and their spoken Sanskrit, I think, is a good program. I'm very impressed. I am aligned with them. I'm very grateful to them. They've helped me a lot in this book. Even before it came out, they helped me a lot. Join them. Then, as far as the intellectual argumentation is concerned, I would say I need to work with Sanskrit universities, traditional Sanskrit universities. Some people here are helping me put together some projects and programs to revive that. So the revival is both as an oral tradition, as a tradition of learning and scholarship, and then Sanskriti includes Jyotish, it includes architecture, it includes Bharatnatyam, it includes Ayurveda. All Sanskrit is encoded in all these knowledge systems. So as these get revived, which they are, Sanskrit also gets revived.
Let's hope for it, sir. Thank you.
And I have one question. When we talk about the home team and when we talk about how we have to, take hold of the Indic narrative and handle it, one thing that I notice is you need a scholarship or an intellectual backing to be recognized in journals and other places. And for that to happen, those centers are controlled primarily outside of India. So how do people who are interested in the Indic narrative and creating it, from the traditional point of view, get the academic credentials or the adhikaritva to actually contribute to work?
Excellent point. It's a chicken and egg. It's a chicken and egg. It's like there is, in the TV industry, there is content, and then there's the channel of distribution. So if people control the channel of distribution, they will not allow our content. And what do we do if we want new content? It won't be allowed. So in the argument you've given, the new intellectual content is not being allowed in the old journals and conferences unless it conforms. And you will not be able to write a PhD in a university of that kind unless you are on their wavelength to some extent. Maybe you can say certain things but not beyond a certain point. So if I have innovative content and the channels don't accept it, I have to create my own channel. We have to create media channels, we have to create academic journal channels, academic conferences, and that is what the government should be doing. They should be creating, rather than funding foreign Indology, and rather than funding foreign guys and enhancing their power even more, what they ought to be doing is creating an annual Indian Indology conference in India, creating a huge journal of Indology in India with eminent Indian devotees of various traditions. People involved in the practice of those traditions, they should be given the funds to have world-class journals, not the people in Western Indology. And we should create a university like Nalanda. They revived Nalanda, gave it to Amartya Sen, and he was basically he was creating a very secular, atheist, left-wing social sciences to bash our tradition in the name of Nalanda. That's as ridiculous as giving the Adi Shankara legacy to some, Charvaks. It's completely ridiculous. Yet it was done. So we need to bring our dharmic ideas of higher learning back in India under the control, and we need to have a organization where Ramakrishna Mission has a member, some Peethams have a member, various other sampradayas and lineages have an appointment. So this kind of a council, this kind of a committee or trust, with this kind of a governing body, where our internal mechanism, the adhikaris are represented, and then we are doing Indology in that way. That is how I would go about it. It needs big money, and the government ought to be doing this.
Just one follow-up question, sir. As a common person who cannot exactly do all of this now, and as a person who's interested in defending Indic scholarship, where do I get started?
Well, it depends on, if you're a common person with money to give, you can write us a check. We are always happy to do that. We're going to organize traditional scholars organization in between Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, and they'll need funding, they'll need conferences, we want every 3-4 months an event, a meeting, so we need some resources for that. If you are not in that mode, if you are somebody who's able to take the knowledge we are producing, like I'm producing, and turn it into blogs, turn it into videos, turn it into documentaries, turn it into user-friendly material, then that's something you could do. So I did a workshop in Bangalore, we had 83 people, how to be an intellectual Kshatriya. That was the purpose. And I gave them projects for my book, saying, okay, I have all these things identified, each of you make groups. So 6 groups were made voluntarily. I left the room and they made their own groups, and each group came up with a work plan of what they will do based on this book. So if you find enough people interested in Chennai, you call me back, I'll do a workshop on how to be an intellectual Kshatriya. And we could start one group here.
The last question.
Namaste Rajivji. Namaste Rajivji. Welcome to Chennai. So my question is, maybe I'll just start to say that your works have been a true inspiration for many of us here, ever since the Invading Sacred and Breaking India book that you have written. I was a bit perplexed when you also mentioned that our present government is thinking of funding Western Indologists.
I'm very surprised. I just heard it.
Yeah.
In this trip, I heard it.
Okay. So my question is, did we outsource our adhikar to the left-wing Marxists? Who is really controlling our government? I mean, if you can inspire many of us, and we understand the problem that we are facing, be it digestion or be it U-turn, be it Western people taking our ideas and knowledge and repacking them back here, why don't our political executives, why don't they understand this? Or is it some kind of inferiority complex or some influence they have?
The strange thing is I have had a huge influence on young people like this. And many of them are in lower middle level rank in the Hindu organizations. Many of them are volunteers, either in the spiritual side or political side. But I haven't had connection with the top guys. I haven't. And so they heard of me. They haven't invited me. I don't self-invite myself. As and when invited, I go. But I got a lot of invites here from Sanskrit Bharati, from Yuv Brigade, you know, things like that. And I'm very happy. So, but I don't have access to the real decision makers, except symbolically a little bit, you know, like that. I'm not consulted, I'm not utilized in terms of my knowledge, what I could do for them. And I'm not looking for money, I'm not looking for anything for myself. I would just like to utilize these ideas. My concern is that the new regime is being heavily infiltrated by the wrong kind of people through intermediaries because they're very sophisticated. I've been to meetings where they're saying now we have to accept this new government rather than fighting them and just infiltrate. And so they're very sophisticated, they know how to do that. They've done it all over the world. They've been doing it for centuries. So the people who come in to do this are so sophisticated, so smooth, and they're Hindus also, some of them compromised. So this is what's going on. But I don't know what to do unless, I mean, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. The good news is, the spiritual leaders are so interested in my message. For the Swami Dayananda Saraswati, always we were connected. I got called by several Chenmai Mission people, Swamis in the US. Now I'm going to Bombay. Chenmai Mission is hosting this event. Mata Amritanand Mai's universities called me several times. Art of Living going to launch this book in Bangalore tomorrow. And so on. More and more spiritual organizations, Ramakrishna Mission. I'm so happy that, and I want to cultivate this more and more. So I feel that in the spiritual organizations, my access to the top is expanding because they're understanding that there is a need for more than just teaching the adhyatmic side. You have to teach what's happening in the Kurukshetra. But in the political domain of Hinduism, I think they're very busy in their own world, not so open to an outsider like me, and more tendency for their people to quickly copy an idea here and there and quote it inside and become very important. But without the tapasya, without the deep knowledge, it's only a superficial understanding and it's not good enough. Sometimes it's even misleading. But I don't want to pick a fight or argument. I just let it go, and when the time comes, if the time comes, I'll be there. If it doesn't come, I'm doing my job anyway. I'm doing it as my Swadharma, and as long as I'm doing it as my Swadharma, I'm happy. And if it satisfies somebody and they want me to help them out, I'm available. Thank you.
We have come to the end of this talk. On behalf of the revered Swamijis, the Brahmacharis and the devotees, Rajivji, we extend a heartfelt thanks to you for having accepted and delivered this talk here. And as a devotee of the Ramakrishna Mission, I'd like to thank our revered Swamijis who have sat through this talk, heard him, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussions based on whatever he has said. To you all Swamijis and the Brahmacharis, I extend my heartfelt thanks. And to the devotees here, we are the people who have to be in the Kurukshetra, right? And we need to open up our minds. It's not just devotion alone, there's something more to it. On that, I just want to close on a spiritual note. Priyatam Pundari Kakshaha सर्वयज्ञेश्वरो हरिः तस्मिन् तुष्टे जगत्तुष्टं प्रेणिते प्रेणितं जगत् हरिः ओम तत्सत् श्रीरामकृष्णार्पणमस्तु।